Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. Today we are going to discuss a new philosopher, today new class on a very prominent Vaishnava school. It's a bhakti school, one of the devotional schools of Indian philosophy, one of the school known as one of the well-known Bengal school of Vaishnavism. And the great teacher, the great exponent of this devotion school was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. He was a contemporary of Vallabhacharya. We discussed Vallabhacharya and his Shuddha-Dvaita philosophy earlier. So, Sri Krishna Chaitanya lived between 1485 and 1533. So, it is said that he and Vallabhacharya met and had discussion on devotional topics, devotional subjects in a place called Vrindavan, which is the holy place associated with the life of Lord Krishna. So, his system of philosophy is known as Achintya-Bheda-Abheda. It is a kind of distinction and non-distinction combined, and it is a bit, a system of philosophy which may be, which is a combination of both. So this designation of Achintya-Bheda-Abheda, it comes from the fact that the relationship between Brahman, that's God, on the one hand, and nature, Prakriti, and individual soul. This relationship is achintya, which means incomprehensible, not easily intelligent, not intelligible. It is beyond human comprehension. Since both difference, bheda, and non-difference, abheda, can be predicted, can be found in this system, in this relationship. That is the nature. Just to be, as we proceed further, we'll understand the implications of this. That is, Brahman, God. And remember, when the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Achintya-Bheda-Abheda system, when they use the word God, they're talking, or Brahman, they mean Sri Krishna. So, their highest conception of God is one anthropomorphic God with name and form, attributes and characteristics and qualities. Is a repository of all conceivable human attributes and qualities and excellences. So this is their idea of God. And when you talk about Brahman or Atman or other higher ideas in Advaita, they will tell you that all these are subsidiary aspects of this anthropomorphic God. So as we go further, we understand. So as an introduction to this subject, which needs an introduction because from Advaita, Visishta Advaita, Dvaita, then Dvaita, Shuddha Dvaita and all, and then we need some introduction as to the implication of this distinct school of philosophy. So in Hindu tradition, Vedantic tradition, especially in higher Vedanta, you find two different streams, two broad streams. One stream, according to one, let us say, one trend, the highest goal of human life is to get liberation. Liberation from this cosmic transmigratory cycle. This birth, life, rebirth, and again this continuation of this wheel of cosmic transmigration. This is a very undesirable state of situation according to Vedantics. Because in the Kathopanishad, it's called Sasyamiva Marti Pachite Sasyamiva Ajayade Punaka. We are born, we live, we enjoy, we suffer, and again we die, and then we are reborn. This continuation. This is a very unpleasant situation. It is imperfect and incomplete. And this broad understanding is shared by Buddhists also. Of course, they approach the subject from a different angle. They don't bring in God or devotion or anything. They mostly try to interpret this in terms of law of karma, rebirth, constituting this transmigratory wheel, and getting out of this through liberation, which is called a nirvana, by practicing 8 fundamental spiritual ethical qualities. This is what the Buddhist approach. But in Hinduism, one approach is that we can get out of this transmigration by understanding our true nature. And our true nature is that we are Atman. We are a transcendental, our true nature is that we are a transcendental spiritual reality, for which this body-mind complex is only an instrument by which it reflects, it expresses itself. The moment we realize our transcendental identity, then this continuation of this wheel of samsara, that is transmigratory cycle, comes to an end. We are liberated and we identify our true nature, we return to our own true nature. So sometimes there is a interesting parables. Suppose you have, you are looking for an ornament which you are actually wearing on your neck, but somehow you are under the notion that you have lost it, and you search everywhere. Finally, you realize that it is with you. Like that, when we realize that we are this transcendental reality, that's our true nature, that's Atman or Brahman, which is behind and beyond this body-mind complex, body, senses, mind, intellect, emotions. Behind all this, there is one supreme identity. And once we realize this, we get liberated from this transmigratory cycle. It's called Advaita. And again, apart from Advaita, there are other schools, Ramanuja, Madhva and others. And then again, in this Advaitic tradition, Jnanam, that is, Jnanam doesn't mean intellectual cognition, but realization of our true nature, that leads to mukti or moksha or enlightenment, and it is fundamentally based on the teachings of the Upanishads. We should remember all Vedas have got 4 divisions: Samhita, Aranyaka, Brahmana and Upanishad. Of all the 4, Upanishad constitutes the highest metaphysical, philosophical, spiritual teachings, which focus on one truth, that the reality is one. There is one supreme divine spark that is present in everyone, that is beyond everything, that is immanent, omnipresent and transcendent. And this is called Advaita. And for them, the foundational work is this triple denomination called Prasthana Trayi. They call it actually is based on these triple foundations. Trayi means 3. Prasthana means foundational texts or canons. The Upanishads, Gita and Brahma Sutra. So this is one approach. Then there is another approach There, you don't give so much importance to Upanishads. You accept it because the philosophers of Bhakti school also wrote commentaries on Vedanta Sutras, which or just give an analysis of the fundamental statements, most important statements from the Upanishads. So Ramanuja wrote his own Sri Bhashya, Madhvacharya wrote his own Brahma Sutra Bhashya. Of course, Nimbarka wrote Vedanta Parijata Saurabha. It's a small book. Others did not so much care for Brahma Sutra Bhashya. Of course, in Chaitanya school, one great follower of Chaitanya, called Baladeva, he wrote his own commentary on Brahma Sutras. But according to the Vaishnava schools, there are some other books which have to be taken into consideration. For example, epics and Puranas, Bhagavata Purana, and its earlier form Vishnu Purana. Then an appendix of Mahabharata is known as Harivamsha. So all these are important books for these Vaishnava schools of devotional philosophy. And in that category, Nimbarka, Vallabha, Chaitanya, all the three comes. They give importance to Bhagavata Purana and also Vishnu Purana. Harivamsha is an appendix coming to the end of Mahabharata. It also got more than 20,000 verses. And Mahabharata has got more than 100,000 verses, So, in these Vaishnava schools of philosophy, including Nimbarka, we already discussed. Nimbarka was the exponent of Dvaita, and again Vallabhacharya, he was the exponent of Shuddha-Dvaita. So all of them give importance to these epics and Puranas, semi-mythological, semi-historical works, which contain many stories, also great dialogues and discussions. They also contain higher philosophy. For example, Bhagavata Purana contains a lot of Advaita. It begins Janmadhyasya, that is how it begins, one of the Brahma Sutras, second Brahma Sutra it comes. So, but then these Vaishnava philosophers interpret great works like Bhagavata in terms of their own concepts of devotion to one Saguna Brahman, one anthropomorphic, monotheistic Godhead, in the context of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that God is Bhagavan, that is Lord Krishna, Sri Krishna. So this is an important point to remember. Now, again, you have to remember, after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's times, a number of other movements also came into existence. Even in the 20th century also, many spiritual movements which are quite popular, which have got large following all over the world, also have popularized the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We are not going to discuss these latest denominations and movements because we want to confine ourselves as far as possible to the fundamental metaphysical teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, as I mentioned earlier, according to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna is their idea of Brahman. And this Sri Krishna has got three powers. And this Sri Krishna is the ultimate reality, is personal entity, as God of love and peace and grace, and is just like the Brahman of the Upanishads. Now, do you remember, in the Upanishads, the highest reality is conceived to be one supreme, attributeless, impersonal, transcendental, indescribable, non-definable, supreme reality, a spiritual principle that is our essence, and Advaita, of course, the Upanishads do not negate or reject the ideas of personal God. That's a very, very important point we should remember. Advaita, this I mentioned earlier, Advaita does not reject the idea of a personal God, but it goes beyond the idea of a personal God. It accommodates the idea of personal God. So you can find there's a board written on the doorstep of Advaita, all are welcome. So that's the same board Sri Ramakrishna also had. And that is also the central principle of the original Vedic philosophy. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. Truth is one, sages call it by different names. But when we come to these Vaishnava schools of Bengal, or rather generally speaking, of course, Chaitanya's school became more emphatic. They very much stressed their idea that Sri Krishna alone is Supreme God. All other concepts are subsidiary or subservient to the idea of Krishna. Vallabha and Nimbarka, of course, did not overemphasize, did not become too emphatic. I don't want to use the word too dogmatic, that is a word I would prefer to avoid, but they did not become too emphatic in stressing that their idea of God alone is supreme. But in Chaitanya's school, these later followers, they stress that. But remember, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, there is something to be said about his personality. He was an absolutely wonderful, very learned, very humble, very saintly, and very endearing kind of personality. He never uttered one negative word against any system of philosophy or any system. He was so absolutely, completely broad-minded and compassionate. So, just a few ideas about this teaching. The ultimate reality is personal, that is Brahman. And in this context, Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna, remember those who are not familiar, Sri Krishna is the main character in some of the most important literary, classical, mythological books in Hinduism, Bhagavata Purana and Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata itself, Sri Krishna is the supreme, the defining character. So Chaitanya, of course, regards Krishna as Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. The word Bhagavan is used. So Bhagavan has got its own special meanings I am going to discuss right now. So taking this idea from Bhagavata Purana and Vishnu Purana, the devotional schools, the Chaitanya school, emphasizes the point Lord Krishna is Bhagavan himself, the Lord himself. But in Mahabharata, the greatness of Krishna appears in a totally different setting. In the Mahabharata, Krishna is a great philosopher, he's a great diplomat, he's a great warrior, he's the one who rescues people in distress, women in distress. He is the great troubleshooter. Whenever there is a controversy, any problem, he interferes, he advises. Whenever somebody is praying to God, struggling to find out a way how to pray to God, Krishna comes there and gives directions. When there is a controversy and conflict between two royal houses of the Kuru dynasty, Pandavas and Kauravas, Krishna goes there as a diplomat, he tries his best to avoid a war between these two royal branches of the same dynasty. So he's a diplomat, a philosopher, and a wise man. And again, I was giving a lecture on Mahabharata this morning. Krishna comes across as a very realistic, very intelligent, and very practical and very idealistic. So how to combine high idealism and high practicality you find in Mahabharata, in Lord Krishna's character. He is the highest philosopher. But he knows one truth. The highest philosophy itself may mean nothing unless it is brought down to the level of some practical utility. So this morning I was giving the example of Yudhishthira and Prince Minskin, Dostoevsky's Prince Minskin in the novel The Idiot. So, the highest philosophy has absolutely no value unless you bring it down to this Mother Earth and make it practical in some context or other in our everyday life. And Krishna alone knows how to do it. That's the uniqueness of Krishna. So, the Krishna of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a divine person who blesses everyone. He is the repository of all divine qualities. All other Brahman, Atman, these are all different expressions of this personal God Krishna. But that Krishna in Mahabharata is an ideal householder, and he teaches monks and ascetics. He's a philosopher. He is the one who rescues women and children in distress. When there is an imminent war, he comes to the diplomatic table and he tries to avert a possible catastrophe. All that he does, that's how the highest spiritual philosophy becomes somehow useful in our everyday life. So that is the magic of Krishna's character in Mahabharata. But that Krishna is different from the Krishna of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Here Krishna is Brahman and he is Satchidananda. Existence, knowledge, bliss. He is infinite, he is omnipotent, and he is omnipresent. He is the very embodiment of all conceivable qualities that we can think of. He says Saguna Brahman. And this Krishna has got three Shaktis or powers. That's how he works in this world. One is Swarupa Shakti, the other is Maya Shakti, the third one is Jiva Shakti. So Swarupa Shakti, because he is called Chit Shakti, he upholds his own existence and gives existence to others. So he is Satchidananda. And there is Maya Shakti, called Achit Shakti or Jada Shakti. It has got two aspects. One is Gunamaya, the other that is consists of Sattva Guna, Rajo Guna, Tamo Guna, and Jiva Maya, which reduces a person to the level of ordinary jivas and makes him caught in the bondage of transmigration. And this creation of the world proceeds from this Maya Shakti and Jiva Shakti. Now, I shall come to some important points here. I just mentioned here, one famous statement. In the Gita, in the Bhagavata Purana, Lord Krishna's important qualities are mentioned here. So, the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they will repeat one important idea, and that is very, very famous. That is, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishnaha tu Bhagavan Swayam. If we mean just Krishna emphatically, is Bhagavan himself. So Bhagavan is a unique concept in Hindu tradition. Bhagavan means somebody who is endowed with bhagas, certain unique qualities, attributes and characteristics. And they're called bhaga. So 6 bhagas, that is great prosperity, great energy, including bravery, great reputation, and again great effulgence, great knowledge, and great renunciation, great non-attachment. Actually, surprisingly, the definition of Bhagavan most emphatically comes not in the books of Chaitanya school of Vaishnavism, but in the Gita Bhashya of Shankaracharya. That is something very interesting. In the Gita Bhashya, Ubodghata of Gita Bhashya, Shankaracharya says, Aishwaryasya Samagrasya Yashasya Dharmasya Yashasa Kriyaha. The Jnana Vairagyo Shaiva Shannam Bhaga Iti Rita. There are some different interpreted slightly different part of it, different versions of the same sloka. Aishwaryasya, Samagrasya, Dharmasya, Yeshasaha, Sriyaha, Jnana Vairagasya, Atha, Mokshasya Shannam Bhaga Itirina. These are the 6 attributes of Bhagavan. So what are they? One is, he will be endowed with infinite, incomparable prosperity, effulgence, all that is wonderful. And then he is with the embodiment of Dharma. And then he will have a great name because of his unique attributes. And also he will be also the embodiment of Sri, anything auspiciousness. And also he will be the embodiment of supreme spiritual knowledge. And along with that, he also will be the embodiment of the highest renunciation or non-attachment. And also, he will be the embodiment of the highest ideal of spiritual enlightenment, liberation, moksha. He is the one who can give moksha, liberation, spiritual enlightenment to those who pray to him. These are the attributes of Bhagavan. This definition historically, for the first time, is clearly stated not in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's book, but in the commentary on the Bhagavad Gita written by Shankaracharya, which was written almost 800 years before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time. So that should be an important point to remember. So, now coming to subject, a little bit of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's history. He was born in the state of Bengal today. And one unique characteristic of Chaitanya's school was that during his time, it became a kind of spiritual reform movement. It is said historically that according to many historians, when there was large-scale Islamization of what is now known as Bangladesh and West Bengal together, and this was one place, one state speaking the same language, the huge conversion of Hindus into Islamic religion in 16th century. Chaitanya's system, which opened the doors of religion and spirituality to everyone without any caste distinction. So he was such a great social reformer. Chaitanya's system itself became a great source of relief, a great social reform movement in course of time, because people who are flocking to an alien religious tradition, a fanatical tradition, they felt like coming back to their own ancestral faith, because Chaitanya accepted everyone, low and high, rich and poor, the kings and also the common people, into his fold. So that is one unique moment. This level of social reform aspects cannot be attributed to any of the other schools of Vaishnavism or Vedantic tradition. Other Vedantic tradition, of course, you have to admit that during Shankaracharya's time, the concept of social reform itself was irrelevant. Long before, it was in 7th century AD. So there was no need for this kind of social reform at that time. Ramanuja and Madhvacharya, Nimbarka and Vallabha lived at a time when these foreign invasions from Arabia and Afghanistan already started disturbing the socio-cultural landscape of India, especially North India. Still, Ramanuja's system, though it was flexible, more flexible, still Ramanuja, Nimbarka, Vallabha or others, their schools of spiritual movements or religious movements did not take the form of social reform movements the way it happened to Chaitanya's school. So, because he was maybe historically his greatness was that he accepted everyone into his spiritual tradition. As a young man, he was a learned scholar, but he became a great devotee. In course of time, he went to Vishnugaya, and there he was initiated into this tradition of Krishna Bhakti. the school of devotion dedicated to Lord Krishna. And he was initiated into that tradition by a monk with the name Ishwarapuri, who was actually a disciple of a far greater well-known monk known as Madhavendra Puri. So, and then, of course, his movement took deep roots, and three important places became centers of Chaitanya movement in North India. One is Vrindavan. It's a place associated with Lord Krishna's life, his early growing up, Vrindavan. And then Navadvip, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born. And Puri, which is a famous temple in the neighboring state of Orissa, Jagannath temple, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lived towards the last 13 years of his life, were spent in this temple town of Puri. These are three important places which became well known, which became popular centers for the devotees of Chaitanya school. So, again, you find there are certain important statements in the not only Bhagavata Purana, but also in the Bhagavad Gita, Vedaisha Sarvai Rahameva Vedyaha. You can find the statement in the Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter. I am the one to be known by all Vedas. So, they take these statements and literally interpret that the Brahman of the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and other Vedanta scriptures imply that Lord Krishna himself is the supreme reality, and they used to, according to the tradition, Chaitanya himself was an incarnation of Lord Krishna. And of course, there are a few more things to be mentioned, Chaitanya's impact on society at that time. Many people from different walks of life, including high officials of Islamic kingdoms, became his disciples. For example, he was famous, a Kasi Muslim governor became his disciple, and also the great Haridas, Nityananda, and Murari, they all became Chaitanya's disciples, and they popularized Chaitanya's teachings in course of time. Now, one important point to remember that is historically important. Chaitanya's school can be linked to Madhvacharya's tradition. There is a difference, of course. They don't agree on interpreting certain important statements in the fundamental scriptures of Bhagavata Purana. But still, historically, Chaitanya's system can be called a continuation of Madhvacharya's system. For Madhvacharya, Vishnu is the supreme reality. For Chaitanya, Lord Krishna, Sri Krishna is the supreme reality. For Ramanuja, Srimad Narayana is the supreme reality. And again for Vallabhacharya, Radha Krishna is the supreme reality. So, all these are different names which indicate the same spiritual person, the same spiritual person in India's religious tradition. But minor differences. Chaitanya school emphasized that all other aspects of Vishnu, etc., are different expressions of Sri Krishna. And for that, they quote statements like Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna alone is Bhagavan. Historically, as I mentioned, though it is associated with Madhvaism, and sometimes called the Madhva Gaudiya school. Sometimes Chaitanya school is Madhva Gaudiya school. But because of some fundamental philosophical differences with Madhvaism, it is often regarded as an independent school. Chaitanya himself did not write any important book. Though he wrote certain famous hymns. But a disciple, Rupa Goswami, has written what called some important books, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, etc. And Jiva Goswami also written commentaries on both these subjects. Again, another well-known philosopher belonging to Chaitanya school known as Baladeva Vidya Vibhushana, he wrote a well-known commentary on Brahma Sutras called Govinda Bhashya. And Govinda Bhashya interprets Brahman as Sri Krishna himself. Now you have to remember, Brahma Sutra is the same as Vedanta Sutras. About 544 sutras, divided into 4 chapters, each chapter having 4 divisions called pada. Now, in the Vedanta Sutras, the absolute reality is expounded in the light of important statements from Upanishad literature. The Upanishads themselves, if you read, you can see, they expound the Supreme Godhead as one attributeless, transcendental, impersonal reality. It's called Nirguna, Niragara, Nirvishesha, etc. Vajama, Gochara, etc. So, the literal translation is Brahman without attributes. But the real implication, according to Advaita, is Brahman beyond attributes. Brahman has no qualities. That's a wrong translation. Brahman beyond qualities. So the indescribable, non-definable, infinite nature of the supreme spiritual reality is explained by saying that it is beyond any kind of definition or cognition in terms of qualities, attributes or characteristics. So when you use the word, when we read the statements of Brahman is devoid of attributes, nirguna or nirvishesha, etc. The real implication is it is beyond any kind of definition or cognition in terms of attributes. If Brahman is called impersonal, the literal meaning may be not personal, when you having no personal attributes. But real implication is beyond any kind of definition, description or cognition in terms of name and form. That's the idea behind. So in other words, Advaita accommodates within it all the ideas and concepts of anthropomorphic Godhead that you find in different schools of Vaishnavism. But this is not frequently understood, or maybe in course of interpretation, they emphasize too much of the impersonal aspect, so that people felt the need to start a new movement to fight against what they perceive to be a kind of dry, idealistic concept. So Advaita is something dry. Advaita denies names and forms of God. Advaita doesn't deny. Advaita says Brahman can have name and form. Brahman is beyond any kind of limitation in terms of name and form. It beyond any kind of limitation in terms of name and form. So when you define something with a name and form, you are limiting it. It's no more infinite. So it's beyond any kind of limitation. And the only way I can relate this is, especially to Western audience, is to compare Meister Eckhart's own idea of this transcendental reality, which transcends the idea of Holy Trinity. I mean, of course, he was a Dominican priest. He nearly lost his life because of this understanding. So, This is an important point. So when we are going to take up some of the statements in Vaishnava schools, Chaitanya school, sometimes it can appear that it's a fight against one school of philosophy, Advaita, which denies God any kind of attributes, qualities, name and form. So another school says, no, God has certain forms and qualities. It's not like that. Advaita accommodates in it the idea of God in name and form. But it also says there is a higher idea which transcends name and form without rejecting name and form. That's why you have to remember Shankaracharya himself established monasteries, installed temples, visited temples, purified the rituals in many temples. For example, temples like Kanchipuram, which are some peculiar rituals which Shankaracharya went and purified. In many temples he did that. And he wrote the most wonderful devotional poetic classics on Hindu spirituality. Hymns praising different deities, different gods and goddesses installed in different temples. So you have to understand this very well because I want to mention this. So that's why I want to avoid any reference to today's popular movements who may claim to follow Chaitanya school. I want to avoid that because very often, unfortunately, they misinterpret Advaita as Mayavada. This word Mayavada is a term used by Ramanuja, Madhvacharya and Vallabha, Nimbarka and also Chaitanya, not Chaitanya himself, but his followers. Chaitanya himself never wrote anything of a critical nature, anything criticizing other schools of philosophy. So this is an important point to remember. So Baladeva wrote this well-known commentary on Brahma Sutras, that is Govinda Bhashya. And his introduction is called Siddhanta Ratna. Then Rupa Goswami and Jiva Goswami, and of course later Baladeva, they all popularized Chaitanya's school of philosophy. Now, bhakti, according to bhakti or devotion, is the only means of liberation in Chaitanya school. Bhakti to see Krishna. And that bhakti can be either Vaidhi bhakti or it can be called Ruchi bhakti. There are two approaches, rather two phases in our devotional evolution. At the beginning of our life, we may start spiritual practices according to certain conventions and traditions. We may read certain books to understand how to pray, how to do worship, how to perform rituals. And we may do our best to scrupulously follow those rules and regulations. Kind of conventional devotional disciplines. It is called Vaidhi, according to Vidhi. Vidhi means injunctions, statements, do's and don'ts in different books. Then there is a higher bhakti, and that higher bhakti alone can take us to spiritual liberation. It's called Ruchi bhakti. Ruchi means affection. You perform rituals, prayers, worship, all that because you love God. It's something higher. At that stage, you transcend the earlier phase of conventional rituals. The same thing I mentioned in the philosophy of Vallabhacharya. According to Vallabhacharya, there are two phases in the evolution of bhakti or devotion. One, what you call Madhyada bhakti. Sravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Archanam, Vandanam, Padaseva, etc. 6. You listen to some wonderful teachings, hymns and devotional poetry, praising the Lord, and then yourself you chant, you go about chanting, reciting devotional hymns. and then remember, you try to bring to your mind again and again the thought of God. And then you do puja service, you do service in temples, in churches, in any place of worship. That itself becomes an expression of your devotion to God. And then you can practice your own private rituals in your own home. So all these, and then you bow down, show your obeisance, your respect, your reverence to the Lord. All these can constitute what we call Maryada Bhakti, the conventional Bhakti. And when you do this, you have to follow certain conventions and practices, disciplines. In Hindu tradition, you have to take bath in the morning, you have to perform you can find Hindus practicing the sandal paste, all those things, vibhutis, all that, you have to perform certain clothes. And also in Christian tradition or any Buddhist tradition, there are certain do's and don'ts that we have to follow. This phase of devotional practice. And you have to find out how it is written in books. You may approach a priest or somebody to learn how to do it, and you try your best to follow that. Now, these rules and regulations become irrelevant when you develop real devotion to God. And that devotion is not devotion, it is love and affection to God. A classic example in Christian tradition, you can find that you can have to remember the autobiographical writings of Saint Teresa of Avila, or the expressions that come from the pilgrim, the way of a pilgrim, when he learned Jesus' prayer in the well-known mystical book of Russian Orthodox tradition. When the way of a pilgrim, the pilgrim learned and started practicing Jesus' prayer from a monk, then he transcended all conventions. Gradual transcendence, outgrowing conventions. So in Chaitanya school also there is called, that is called the Vaidhi Bhakti. According to injunctions, conventions, rules and regulations, you have to follow certain things. You have to read the Shastras and you follow that. To be very frank with you, when we actually develop devotion to God, love for God, then you may not have much patience to follow the conventional practices. For example, when you meet your own mother or father, let's say the embodiment of affection, you feel a kind of freedom. You don't have to follow conventional, knocking at the door, may I come in, sir. If you do that, if you have to do that while going to your own mother, then maybe you don't have a very good loving relationship with your mother. Suppose your mother tells you you have to knock at the door before entering, you have to write half a week earlier for an appointment. There is some kind of vidhi, means some kind of formality, kind of artificiality, a kind of mechanical kind of relationship. But you can directly go to your mother. You're transcending this formality, these conventions and practices. The same applies to our relation with God. So somebody who actually develops love for God, as in Pushti Marga of Vallabhacharya, then you transcend, you go beyond the conventional rules and regulations. And that is called Ruchi Bhakti, or love, or the path of affection. So Bhakti in its highest sense is affectionate service of God. And for His alone, equal Raganuga Bhakti. When you practice this, then you feel a very close, intimate relationship with God. This alone can help you to come out of this transmigratory cycle. That's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says. So, anyways, we will continue our discussion next week. We can have interaction. You are most welcome. We are just opening up a new, very important phase, and Chaitanya school is very important, very relevant, especially because he represents one of the most liberating examples of spirituality in Hindu spiritual tradition. In Shankaracharya you find the grandeur of philosophy, metaphysics, spirituality, of an exalted transcendental stature and nature. In Chaitanya you find that spirituality comes down to the level of the common people. So he was himself a learned man, but he wrote one or two, well, Jagannatha-astakam and a few devotional hymns he wrote. And the last years of his life was spent in the famous temple, town of Puri, where he passed away. So we'll come to that later. Now we can have interaction. Most welcome. Thank you.
Visiting a Hare Krishna temple, you get the sense that the Bhagavad Gita is very important. I have verses of the Bhagavad Gita, Uttam Parantvayam and Etkaroli Dashnasi and Yoshi.
Yeah.
So is Bhagavad Gita more important than the Bhagavad Purana, or is it?
No, Bhagavad Gita is a part of Mahabharata. And Mahabharata is spiritual only in a particular sense, because Mahabharata contains many episodes which are very profound and very spiritual. But the work itself, it doesn't have the status of a spiritual work like Bhagavata Purana. Bhagavata Purana is primarily a spiritual, a devotional classic. So, whatever Bhagavad Gita says, you can find in Bhagavata Purana much more, in a more extensive language and expression you find. That's true.
Can you repeat the 6 attributes of Bhagavan according to?
Or you find the 6 attributes of Bhagavan. Yeah, I shall try to repeat.
In Sanskrit terms.
Yeah. So you can just keep in mind. So I shall try to, yeah. First of all, Bhaga. The word Bhaga means an attribute. Aishwarya, Virya, Yasha, Sri, Jnanam, Vairagyam. Aishwarya means prosperity, effulgence, affluence. There cannot be anything in the nature of wanting something incomplete or imperfect in God. Virya means energy, the power, the ability to do great things. Yasha means kirti, means reputation, great name for doing great things, knowing great things. Then Sri is auspiciousness. Sri also can mean prosperity. Jnanam, the highest knowledge. Again, Vairagyam, in spite of all that, total detachment. With a slight difference, you find the same sloga coming in Shankaracharya's commentary on Gita. The Bodhgata means the introduction, the early part of it. Aishwarya, Samagrasya, etc. I find in the Shankara Bhashya also. So, what I mean, why I mention this? Shankaracharya also accepts this idea of Bhagavan. 600 years before Chaitanya, 500 years before Nimbarka or Madhva, Shankaracharya has written all these things about Bhagavan, the Lord, the repository of all auspiciousness. In the commentary you find in the beginning of the Gita Bhashya, beginning means the word Gata introductory part. So, why I mentioned that, the Advaita context, because Advaita accepts all this. But Advaita also tells you there is a higher realization, which is not a rejection of what you realize now, but going beyond what you understand now. Without rejecting, but transcending, going beyond. So when you reach, for example, this Chaitanya concept of the Raganuga Bhakti, what happens, intense spiritual love for God. So there is a comparison, the cowherd girls, of gopis of Vrindavan. This is to be understood. Lord Krishna was a small little kid playing in Vrindavan along with other small children. So that is the background that should be kept in mind. So children will have close, intimate friendship. 5-year-old, 6-year-old children playing together like that. That purity, that intensity, the love of that's mentioned here. Like that, a true devotee will have pure love for God, and at that time he transcends all vidhis, all injunctions, all conventions, all external rituals. He doesn't have patience, he doesn't feel the need for external ritual. I gave the example. When you go to meet your own mother, grandmother, and you don't talk like to your grandmother the way you talk to a diplomat when two ambassadors are meeting, you have to follow certain protocol. Because there is so much of distance between you and the ambassador of another country. You have to follow the protocol. That's not the way you interact with your own grandmother. Why? Because you transcend the need for that protocol. This idea behind. So wherever there is too much of conventions and protocol and diplomatic, you should be diplomatically correct language you have to use, dress properly. But you don't have to be so careful about your dress code when you go to your own grandmother. If you have to do that, then there is something wrong with your own relationship with the grandmother. Okay, so the idea behind, so transcending the need for rituals, formalities, that is one unique characteristic of true love of God. That's what is called Raganuga Bhakti or Ruchi Bhakti in Chaitanya tradition. That idea comes in Vallabhacharya's tradition, in the form of Pushti Marga, that comes in Ramanuja. At the time of Prapatti, when you surrender yourself to God, you go beyond all conventions and practices. That's the idea behind. Okay, thank you.
I just had a question regarding, in terms of India's population, how many people follow Ramanuja? How many people follow Chaitanya? How many Advaitins are there now? So I was just curious, in India as a whole, we hear these philosophies, but I'm just curious, numbers.
Yeah, so actually these boundary lines are not so clearly demarked, not so clearly visible, because people may claim to be Advaitins and visiting every temple everywhere. People claiming to be devotees, reading the Upanishads and listening to talks on Advaita. In today's India, these boundary lines are almost invisible. They have disappeared completely. So the only advantage is this produce a lot of wonderful dialectical, polemical, philosophical classics for the almost 600-700 years since Shankaracharya to Madhusudana's time. So more or less a contemporary of Chaitanya. So other than that, except some new movements which have become popular during the last 40-50 years, I don't want to refer to that, where they overemphasize in a language that Chaitanya would not have accepted at all. He totally disowned, because Chaitanya was a wonderful human being. It was very difficult for him to criticize anyone, to reject anyone, to be unkind to anyone, to be rude to anyone, to write and speak rudely about anyone. Just like Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya said, we have absolutely no quarrel with anyone, Susiddhanta vyavasthasu dvaitino nichidadridam parasparam viruddhyante taihi ayam na viruddhyate. It comes in the Maundukya Karya, Gaudapada Karya, which is written 150 years before Shankara. But Shankara wrote a marvelous commentary on it. Without the commentary, Gaudapada Karya would have remained unknown. But there Shankaracharya says, Asmadiyoyam Vaidiko Dharma na viruddhite Atma Ananyatvad. Everyone, there is Atman in all beings. So we do not quarrel with anyone. That level of universal acceptance you find in Chaitanya's devotional system, devotional philosophy. And he was himself an embodiment of that higher ideal. He himself was a character who practiced this highest spiritual oneness of humanity. With Advaitic or devotional, that's the only difference. In Shankara, you find the Advaitic oneness of humanity. In Chaitanya, the devotional oneness of humanity. So he did not talk of any boundary lines. Only he said that Sri Krishna is the Supreme God. And most of the time he was in ecstasy, praying and meditating and chanting. That's all. So that's the idea. So anyway, it's very difficult for me to tell you the demographic of different denominations and traditions. Very difficult to do. Okay? Because they overlap each other in all traditions. There's so much of overlapping. Yeah.
Are there a lot? Are most people, like, how many atheists would there be in India? Is India? We sort of hear that India is a very religious country. Is that actually true, or are there hundreds of millions of atheists also?
I don't know, but there's a huge number of atheists in India. That's true. There is, there is. I don't know how many, but many of those who claim to be atheists will also go to temples. Only that's what I think. It's not like, so in fact, India is a kind of political museum where you can still find a demographically elected communist government. But most of them go to temples also. And all of them follow their own religious traditions also. It is a very peculiar, very mind-boggling. And so it's very funny. It's only small, tiny part of India you find this strange phenomenon. Still, but nobody cares for it. It's on the way out. But they also only on paper. Otherwise, they read books. It's just so there is nothing. Okay, thank you. The question. Yeah.
Thank you, Swami. I remember Swami Seshananda said that when he was teaching, that the boys would never come to worship unless except when before an exam, they come and want to worship Saraswati.
Yeah. They put some money, they go to temple, they put some money in the undi, they do that. So that's true, that's a common thing.
Okay, thank you, Swami.
Yeah.
Swami.
Namaste.
The only thing that always amazes me is all the other schools that we have been studying are like a variation of a Dvaita school. Like, Madhvacharya believed like Vasudeva, then Krishna, Vishnu, and Narayana. And all of them are like some kind of variants of, none of them are Advaita. But mostly they're Dvaita schools. They do believe in the Brahman has a shape, form, Vishnu, it could be Vishnu, Krishna. So why there is even now you see like Chaitanya schools, you see like a variety of Dvaitis all over India, not necessarily like they're like not necessarily together. Let's put it that way. And you don't see Madhvas, followers of Madhvas and Chaitanya or Ramanujan like worshipping similar. They always have, they subscribe to different schools even now. Is it like, as you mentioned, Chaitanya school was probably like because of the social nature of the whatever, they wanted to include more population, whereas the others were more Brahminical and weren't involving too many, they were not that inclusive. Was that the reason why all these different schools happened?
Okay,
I don't know if I'm very clear in my question.
I think so. The most universally accepted view is Advaita. That's for one reason, because during the last 200 years, except Prabhupada in the later half of 20th century, Vivekananda, Vichinmayananda, all of them Shivananda, Rishikesh Shivananda, Divine Life Society, many such these organizations, they propounded some kind of Advaita. That's the important thing. To give an example, can you imagine Swami Vivekananda coming to Chicago in 1893, addressing a huge audience, nearly 5,000, 6,000 people, in a platform where every world religion was represented? Can you imagine Vivekananda talking Madhvacharya system of eternal damnation? Do you think these 4,000, 5,000 people had got up and clapped their hands?
No.
Absolutely
No.
no.
Absolutely not. No.
Okay, now coming subject. Suppose Vivekananda had taken up Chaitanya, Krishna is the only God. That would be just an Hindu version of the finality of Christ. I don't think Americans would have found anything very interesting in that sort of thing, Absolutely no. Even Ramanuja, suppose Lord Vivekananda said Srimad Narayana is only the Supreme God, I don't think people were bothered about him. But Swami Vivekananda presented a view that is all accommodating, all accepting, and all transcending, very universal and very humanistic. That is Advaita. So even now, people, well-educated people who think independently, no matter what tradition they belong to, they have to come to some kind of Advaita, some idea of oneness and unity of humanity, without any barrier. That's an important thing to remember. And that's why I said Advaita is still the most accepted and acceptable and recognized idea of religion and spirituality among Indians. I'm talking about people who are independent, but Advaitis don't worry about, they also go to all temples also. Advaitins also will go to Ramanuja temples, Madhvaja temple, Chaitanya school, absolutely no problem. They have no problem. So I think this denominational rigidity that you find in certain traditions is mostly a transference of the typical Lutheran or Protestant rigidity transferred to these new denominations. The evangelical zeal that you find is alien to Hindu tradition. This is a very important thing. It's more like the Christian evangelicals who stand in front of Hindu temples using a language which is not very complimentary about the temple rituals, which is a bad name for Christ, the great man, the great. Like that, you find the same evangelical spirit has caught hold of many denominations who actually do the same thing, only say instead of finality of Christ, they say finality of Krishna. That's the only difference. But Advaitis don't say that. You follow Christ all the way, fine, wonderful. You follow Buddha, wonderful. No problem. So that's why people, in no matter what tradition they belong to, they all subscribe, endorse some kind of Advaitic idea. Otherwise, you won't get much recognition. Of course, again, if you find, then you talk about large number of people following this, that's a different matter. That's true. But still the most accepted and acceptable idea of religious tradition is Advaita. Even here I am talking about Advaita. You remember. Because without Advaita, I cannot really talk anything about Indian spirituality. Otherwise, Indian spirituality has nothing new to it, which you don't find in any other traditions. If you have got finality of Krishna in Chaitanya system, there is finality of Christ in Christianity. Then what difference does it make? But an Advaitin comes and tells you, well, Christ is also acceptable for us. He's also a great teacher, spiritual teacher. We can respect Christ as much as we respect our Hindu sages. Only an Advaitins can tell you. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha. It's an old Rigvedic statement. That's the original statement of Advaita. So if you are talking about popularity, Advaita is still the most fashionable and accepted and acceptable out view. Okay, thank you.
Did Swami Vivekananda have an instinct when he delivered the Chicago Address in 1893?
Yeah.
The audience would respond the way they did to that universal message of inclusion.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
The question is, did he have an instinct that that would be the American reaction?
Precise. Yeah, I think. Do you want me to say something to this?
I do.
What do you want me? Tell me, please repeat. Yeah.
Well, he comes as a representative
Yeah.
of the universal tradition, and
Yeah.
he delivers that message in his language at
Yeah.
the Chicago
Yeah.
Address.
Yeah.
And obviously he's tapping into old wisdom, but
Yeah.
he must have a notion that on a new continent that he's never been to before,
Yeah.
that this is the message for the West.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is
yeah.
it because you think it's it cuts through all the divisions
Yeah. Precisely.
of denominations and sectarian thinking?
Yeah. That's true. Because Swamiji was aware of the new intellectual movements that emerging in the east coast of United States. He was familiar with the transcendentalism. Many of the teachings of Emerson were known among the educated people of India at that time. So, and again there were this movement against the creationistic ideas, and then the idea that God created this world, but people in the east coast of the United States, they were looking for something more universal, but they were not very clear as to what they were looking for. But they felt a kind of impatience with the prevailing religious landscape, which was narrow and then which was rigid, which asked you to believe certain things. And Vivekananda accidentally, he happened to speak some important points related to Advaita in his first Chicago address. And as he traveled different parts of the United States from 1893 to 1897, he often reminds Americans that you don't have to go outside of your own religious tradition to find out this Advaita, because in your own tradition, if you go deeper, you can strike gold, you can find Advaita. So that's why Swamiji says a Vedanta makes a Christian a better Christian, Vedanta makes a Buddhist a better Buddhist. You can find. He doesn't ask somebody to change the religion, become a Vedantin. So Vedanta can help you to go deeper into your own tradition, whatever tradition you are born into. Vedanta gives you a kind of spiritual outlook that will urge you to dive deeper, to go deeper into your own tradition. Don't stop at the surface, the superficial. If you go deep enough, you find Vedantic ideas in Christianity, in Judaism, in Buddhism, everywhere. That was one of his important revealing statements. He didn't want anyone to leave his own religion behind and come to Vedanta. There's no question of leaving something behind and going to something. You stay where you are and go deeper into your own tradition. You will strike gold. That's your own Vedanta, the reservoir of Vedanta you find in your own tradition. That was very inspiring. Now, if Vivekananda had talked about Madhvacharya's eternal damnation theory, I don't think it would have many takers in 1893 in World Parliament of Religion, or even Chaitanya's system. Finality of Krishna. Finality of Krishna is perfectly okay for the rural folk of those times. It was needed, very much needed. Chaitanya did a great service to Indian society, Hindu society at that time. It's a wonderful wonderful service. But that would not have made a difference, would not have impressed people in the later half of 19th century who had enough of many Dvaidik or Visita-Dvaidik denominations in different religious traditions. They were looking for something more unifying, more harmonizing, more universally humanistic. And they found it in Vivekananda's lectures on Advaita.
And that's the direction I was asking about. It seems to be a message for every age, especially especially at times when the divisions are severe.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a message for all times and for all people. You are right. Because Advaita is not something that comes from one religion that you have to accept, not at all. From an anthropological or cultural perspective, you may call Advaita the finest fruit of Hindu religion. But then Hinduism contains many things. Vivekananda's statement is that from the highest flights of Vedanta philosophy to the lowest of atheism, the agnosticism of the Buddhist, the atheism of the Jains, each and all have a place in Hindu's religion. Swamiji says, from the highest flights of Vedanta philosophy means Advaita philosophy. Then all kinds of animism, agnosticism, atheism, all these have a place in Hindu tradition. But the highest point of evolution is Advaita. That's what Swami Vivekananda brought to America. And he found that that's what the Americans were looking for. They were not very clear what they were looking for. But they were looking for something more liberating, more universalizing, more humanistic, more harmonizing, more unifying. You mentioned cutting across all divisions, And when Vivekananda spoke about Advaita, they did realize that's what we were looking for.
That is that the devotional literature is vast.
Yeah.
And the one might say the accentuated enthusiasm of some of the bhakti traditions like this one, like the Chaitanya tradition. But I'm asking about historically the Chaitanya tradition would, and the devotional texts like Narada Bhakti Sutra.
Yeah.
So you get texts like this that we look at in Advaita Vedanta. Do these devotional texts also get embraced traditionally in Chaitanya tradition?
Yeah. No, Chaitanya's Raganuga Bhakti, the devotion built upon love for God, pure love for God. That's what Narada says, Sa Paranudakti Ishwara Chandilya, Sa tu asmin Parama Prema Rupa. That is Narada's definition of this Raganuga Bhakti. Sa tu asmin Parama Prema Rupa. So, that higher devotion is of the nature of great love and devotion to the Lord. Another equally important teacher of bhakti, devotion, is Chandilya. Sa Paranuraktihi Ishware. The highest devotion is this supreme love for God. They wrote all these Chandilya and Narada, two ancient teachers of bhakti devotion school, who lived long ago. So, you can find those definitions have been given a new emphasis by Chaitanya through actual practice. So, thousands of people gathering in a place and chanting these devotional hymns and moving in the streets in ecstasy, which actually opened a new door, created new spiritual vibration. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there was a great social reform movement also, Chaitanya actually. Chaitanya opened the door for everyone to enter the world of spirituality. Otherwise, the great Vedantins like Shankara, Ramas and others, they wrote in Sanskrit language, mostly among Pandits. One Pandit living in Benares, reading Ramanuja's Sribhasha, will write a commentary with a refutation of that. So there's a difference of 2,000 kilometers, 1,600 miles between these two places. So, but they were all, these ideas are floating in the world of Pandits and scholars. But in Chaitanya system, religion entered the streets and began to express itself in some kind of a universal, natural, spontaneous outflow of spiritual emotions in the name of love for God and chanting holy names and all that. So that's uniqueness. It was very much needed. Chaitanya's advent fulfilled a strongly felt need for those times. That's the idea behind it. Okay, thank you.
Maharaj, when you put it that way, it's absolutely beautiful. I'm looking forward to the future sessions.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. We'll hopefully, thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.